The following program was produced by Cox Communications exclusively for OSU On Demand.
Welcome to the Cowboy Countdown as we take a look at some of our favorite plays and favorite games in Oklahoma State history. Today's point of emphasis, our favorite sucker plays or trick plays, which are great fun. Dave Hunziker, Robert Allen, glad to be with you and share some of these great moments. There's nothing better, pal, than fooling your opponent, especially in a critical situation. And these things, they don't happen. They don't come out of thin air. Something you rehearse, and then when the opportunity comes, I don't know that there's any more exhilarating moment for a football team when something that you've rehearsed that's supposed to trick somebody actually does it.
Yeah, I think especially for coaches, because coaches always like to think they impact the ball game. Well, when you call a trick play, and like you said, you rehearse it all week, you see something on tape out of your opponent that you think you can trick them, and then they show it to you in the game. And then the other thing, Dave, about these plays is calling it at exactly the right time for maximum impact, not only for that moment, but you brought it up, and we're going to see some plays that completely changed the mode of the game, the atmosphere, the attitude, and actually led to victory.
And in some cases, not only changed the mode of the game, but perhaps changed the future of a football program, as was the case in our number 10 choice.
Telling me that he thinks that we can execute this play. And the reason why we're able to execute the play is because of Sunshine. He's an ex-soccer player, and he has a great feel for the ball. And then he's very flexible, and he's very athletic. And so he practiced it all week. And when I see plays like that in special teams, I have to be convinced during the week that there's at least a better than 50% chance that it can work. And I was convinced because every time in practice he did it perfect. Now I told Larry on the headphones before they kicked it, I said, Larry, you better get a plan ready because we're getting ready to kick this onside. And I said, I bet you Sunshine gets it.
The number 10 play at Kansas after a very poor start for Oklahoma State, down 17-0 early in the third at Kansas. Cowboys score, and then they go to an onside kick that completely caught Kansas off guard, because you don't usually do that early in the third quarter after you've been down 17-0.
Well, and some of the residual around that, like you said, the first half had been terrible.
Oh, gosh.
It was a game Oklahoma State badly needed to win. They needed to get, their head above water, needed to gain some momentum. Bobby Reed had been struggling a little bit. Yeah. He ends up, I think it's really changed the game for Bobby Reed, gave him some momentum. And then, you look at it, you had a rookie, a freshman, playing tackle. That was Russell Okung's first start.
Oh, wow.
And,
I'd forgotten that.
So you got a rookie on the offensive line. Very rarely do you see a true freshman playing on that offensive line, but as we all know now, Russell Okung was not your typical true freshman offensive lineman. Neither was that kicker, Bruce Redden.
Well, Bruce Redden was from Woodward. You might remember that. They called him Sunshine because of his long hair. He was a former soccer player, and they'd rehearsed this. They really noticed Kansas really bailing out too quickly in their kickoff return unit, and they waited for the right time. And as you watch the video, obviously, it's easy to see why it worked. I mean, it was right there, and it was executed perfectly. And a soccer player with touch, as Mike Gundy said on that week's television show, very, very important, because he knew exactly sort of how much to put on the ball to make it work. And
athletic enough to chase it and recover it, because you've got to have a pretty good athlete there. Because and you can see in the video, Kansas is two middle guys, and that's what they were reading off of on their front line and their kickoff. They each take a step back. And that gave you another step between them and the ball when you dribbled it up the 10 yards you need for the onside kick. And so if you don't have a guy athletic enough to chase the ball and get there, then if he gets there about the same time one of those big linemen do, who's going to get the ball? Let's be honest. Bruce Redden was not a very big guy. So very calculated play, and this is definitely one of those ones you have to make sure that you check and know they're going to do what you need them to do in order to make the play successful.
And as you might remember, a big chain of events after that, Darius Bowman with a record-setting performance as the Cowboys went on to win 42-32 in Lawrence over Kansas in a game that certainly was a big win for Oklahoma State. Another list, we'll cover that later on.
The Cowboys are up to the Texas 45, 1st and 10. Wide receivers left and right. I formation behind Fields. Fields with a counter pitch to Tatum Bell. Turns a corner, room to run to the 40, 35, to the 30-yard line. Down the sideline, headed toward the end zone, and he's in! Touchdown, Oklahoma State! It looked like Bell stepped out of bounds at the 25. The officials didn't see it, and Tatum Bell scores 45 yards down the near sideline. Good grief.
I think Texas gave up on the play, Dave. They thought he was going to go out of bounds because he was running out of real estate. But what a cut by Bell at about the 34, maybe the 33-yard line. He cut it right back in, and he stayed right up the sideline.
Number 9 on the list, 2002, Austin, Texas. Tatum Bell with what I think may have been the first time that Les Miles went to the counter pitch, which eventually became in vogue in the NFL. It was a great play.
First time in a big TV game where everybody saw it.
Yes, we saw it in practice.
And you know what? Here's the funny thing on this. This is one that I'll give Les Miles credit on. There's one later on, most of the nation. One of our plays later on, you'll recognize it when we get to it, is one that Les Miles gets credit for now. He shouldn't. It wasn't his play. This one, though, Les deserved credit. And like you said, it was one that got copied, in the highest form of football, which is the National Football League. They took this. So, and you know what? Who was so good? The combination of players in this game were so good at executing it, especially Tatum Bell. And, as an announcer, very rarely do you miss anything, but you mentioned that he may have gone out of bounds, and the officials, he didn't.
He didn't.
It was, but it was that track experience that Tatum had, because how often do you see a track guy swing that leg around like that? That's exactly what he was doing.
And remember the defenders he was going against, a litany of NFL guys. Derek Johnson, for one, who was an All-America linebacker. So he is out-athleting, if you will, some of the best defensive players in college football. Cowboys came up on the short end of that game, 17-15, but that was a terrific play.
No, it was a fantastic play. And you know what? Of all the games that you and I have been a part of on the Cowboy Network that Oklahoma State didn't win, and you really felt they deserved it, that's one of the top ones in my book.
Oh, I completely agree. A look at number 9, Tatum Bell's great run at Texas.
You open this formation up a little bit.
Here it is with the Wildcat, or the spread formation. Toastin, the jump throw, perfected by Tim Tebow, or seen by the Florida quarterback.
Yeah, jump pass again. You get in the Wildcat formation. You're thinking Keith Tostin is coming. That looks like something you see on the basketball court.
Yes, it does.
Our number 8 play, the Cotton Bowl jump pass by Keith Tostin to Wilson Newman against Ole Miss. It's interesting, Robert. Every bowl game, and you go back and think about it, especially the last few years, Mike Gundy comes up with something off the wall. I mean, really off the wall, and typically it works. I think it makes it fun for the players, and so they're really engaged in trying to make sure when they get the chance they execute it.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, in the Ole Miss game, and this went both sides, those were two offenses. You'd like to say the defenses were fantastic, but those were two offenses that were really struggling at that point. And, you have to go back to that and say, that's really one of the best offensive plays of the day for the Cowboys. You hate to say it, a trick play, but it was. And Keith Tostin showing his all-around skill. And, in fact, a lot of people don't remember. The interesting thing about Keith Tostin, when he first showed up at Oklahoma State, he'd been a quarterback at Houston Yates. And he thought he was coming to OSU to play quarterback. He did for about 2 days. He stayed, on the offensive side of the football at quarterback, and then went to I think after that he went to running back.
I believe that's right.
Yeah, he did go to running back and stayed there, but there was a lot of thought that he eventually was going to be on the defensive side as a linebacker, but he finally settled in as kind of a little bit of an all-purpose guy, because if you think about it, he was effective as a runner. Certainly. And by the way, that's the other thing. You remember him playing with that thumb
I was
injury?
going to bring that up. Played the last month and a half with a fractured thumb that needed surgery, and he refused to have it. And he ends up having an all Big 12 season, played the last, 5 regular season in the bowl game with a shattered thumb. Happened at Baylor, if I remember right.
Happened at Baylor, and then again, he also showed in that particular play, he shows his ability to throw the football. We're going to see later on, had another ability, too, that he added to on the offense. But Keith Toastin, one of those guys you really love because he showed intense toughness, and that makes him a Mike Gundy player.
And an all-around guy, Keith Toastin, featured in number 8.
Shotgun with Poston there. They need a little bit more than a yard. They're going to throw for it. Blitz. And wide open is Toastin. Toasting CU secondary. And the Pokes back in the lead with 11:24 to play.
Number 7, Keith Toastin featured again, perhaps the biggest chicanery in all this. Why is your number 3 quarterback that good? That's really the debut of Brandon Weeden. That may be the biggest trick of all. What the heck's this guy doing not playing? Because you had Zach Robinson. That was really when Brandon Weeden showed to everybody how good he could be. But that was a neat play, and a big play gave the Cowboys a lead.
Yeah, as far as trick plays go, and I didn't realize Toastin was coming up that quickly after 8, coming back on 7.
Hey, we never know.
Yeah, you never know with these. But you know, the thing I remember about that play and the call, you and John upstairs saying, there's nobody there. Well, I had been watching Colorado's front 7, and remember, Alex Cade had struggled in the first half. Here comes the third quarterback. Colorado is thirsty for a victory. So at this point, they had nothing to play for, Dave. They were playing out the string.
Well,
in fact, their coach was going to lose his
embattled.
job.
Yeah, very much
exactly. So they are willing to take any chance possible. This is actually the sucker play where the team that got suckered themselves. 61 blitz. Now that's what Oklahoma State calls it when they run it. It's where you basically leave everybody, you leave one person back, everybody else fires. And in this case, I remember, when you came down to me after that play saying, guys, Keith Toastin could have run to I-35. But this is a play where Colorado says, look, we're going to take every chance here. We're going to come after your young quarterback. They probably didn't know how old he was at the time.
They probably didn't.
No.
Probably barely knew who he was.
And they left themselves wide open.
Certainly did. Brandon Weeden showing his stuff, and Keith Toastin highlighted once again, play number 7.
Tight end on the right side, and Weeden, it's a flea flicker. Randall throws it back to Weeden. Weeden throws it deep down the middle for Justin Blackmon. He makes the catch at the 30. Blackmon to the 20, 15, 10, 5. Good night, Vienna. Pistols firing. Razzle dazzle. Touchdown, Oklahoma State.
Number 6, the flea flicker against Nebraska. Justin Blackmon and Brandon Weeden hooking up. I go back to what Dana Holgorsen used to always say, and he told us this many times. This became a habit where you'd see the flea flicker, and you'd always see it in practice, to which he would look at us very matter-of-factly and say, well, you have flea flicker's good in any game. Got to have flea flicker. You got to have flea flicker. Well, we love flea flickers, and that one turned out really well. It was pretty well defended, though. It went for a big touchdown in that game. That's pretty well defended.
You know what? That's a trick play that needed extreme execution, just like you say, because when you look at it, Weeden just throws it pretty as a picture, spiral all the way down. And Blackman's got 2 Nebraska guys on him. His strength after he catches the ball, that's really what this play accentuates, is Blackman's ability, even when there's guys on top of him, once he catches the ball, you got to remember, you got to tackle the big boy. And he is a big, strong runner.
And kids, remember, any playground game, got to have a flea flicker. So we have one on our countdown at number 6, Weeden to Blackmon.
Well, and like you said, with Dana Holgorsen, at one point, the Cowboys were running about a flea flicker a game.
And they worked.
Weeden gets a snap. He'll run it. Quarterback draws straight ahead, breaks a tackle, dives toward the end zone. Yes. He's in! Pistols firing! Touchdown, Oklahoma State! Brandon Weeden, nimble of feet.
At At number 5, Brandon Weeden, who basically delivered everything you could imagine during his Cowboy career, delivers something almost unimaginable. A rushing touchdown against Stanford in the Fiesta Bowl, which I believe, if I remember correctly, was the first rushing touchdown he had ever had in any game at any level.
Absolutely. Never had it at Santa Fe in Edmond. In fact, it goes down as Sherry Weeden, Brandon Weeden's mom, as her favorite play. Her son had, because, she always, and you can understand this if you're a mom. You see everybody else run in for touchdowns and score touchdowns. Well, when you're a quarterback and you specialize in throwing, well, sure, you have a lot of touchdown passes, but you yourself never score the touchdown. You're always, it's like an assist. You're throwing it to the Blackmons and to the Josh Coopers and Colton Shelf almost at the end of that game in the Fiesta Bowl, but you never score one yourself. That's why I think it's Sherry Weeden's favorite.
Well, and the thing is, as much as we say it's unimaginable, that's mainly because of the offense. Brandon Weeden was always probably more athletic and a little better runner than people would give him credit for. He showed that against Baylor. I guess it would have been 2 years ago when he did that, but it was neat to see him get into the end zone. That was a big play. It was a 3rd and goal, if I remember correctly.
And I remember you and John in the radio broadcast talking about how he had to fight and scratch and claw to get in. And so I remember going down to Johnny Barr, and I guess I can get Johnny in trouble for this now. I said, Johnny, was that the called play or was that a check on Brandon's part? Because you just never knew. It wasn't something like you said that had been called for him before. And Johnny goes, no, it was a called play, but it would have been a lot easier if Brandon had gone the way the play was supposed to go. He was supposed to go right. He ended up going left, and he had to fight through a lot of traffic to get there because that's not the way it was blocked.
Well, Brandon Weeden, as was almost always the case, where there's a will, there's a way. Most of the time throwing it, that time running it. In the Fiesta Bowl, our number 5.
Early in the 4th, head coach Mike Gundy went to his bag of tricks and pulled a rabbit out of his hat as wide receiver Seth Newton hit Jeremy Broadway for a 33-yard touchdown that sent Boone Pickens Stadium into a frenzy.
They'll fake it to Hunter. Now pass plays available. Wide open. Touchdown Oklahoma State. Jeremy Broadway. Thrown by Seth Newton, the other wide receiver.
At number 4, in one of the wildest games in Oklahoma State's football history, probably one of the wilder plays of that contest. Seth Newton, a former high school quarterback, a play they had rehearsed over and over again for weeks, and they picked the right time at a critical moment in the 4th quarter for the non-quarterback pass by a former quarterback, puts the Cowboys in the lead.
You brought it up. That's the one thing I remember about this particular trick play more than anything else. We saw it in practice going all the way back to fall camp.
A zillion times.
Yeah, I mean, it was on the ready list every week. It got worked on in the game plan every week, over and over and over again, and you kept thinking, when are they going to pull that out? When are they going to pull that out? Well, this is where we talk about trick plays. As much as the trick itself, it's when do you call it? And you mentioned with Mike Gundy and the offensive staff on this, they call this at exactly the right time. And this was a game where every play mattered against Texas Tech that day. So, yeah, it was perfectly timed, perfectly run, perfectly called.
A great play in a game that went down to the final play. A Cowboy victory. In this case, Seth Newton, a wide receiver and former quarterback, delivering the goods. Our play number 4.
This will be a 48-yarder. He's not made one longer than 32 this year from the center of the field with Sky Ryland holding. Snap back. It's a fake. They throw it to Luke Phillips, running on the near sideline. 30, 25, 20. He has the first down. The fake field goal worked. It goes for 11 yards to Luke Phillips, and he has 4.55 speed, Tom. And they talked about the chance that it might happen this week.
At number 3, a play in the minds of several Cowboy fans that could be a candidate for number 1. The fake field goal executed by Oklahoma State against Kansas State in 2003. Robert, here's another play that had been rehearsed over and over again Les Miles, I think there was some talk they might use it at Nebraska in the season opener. He got really paranoid about it. So they shelved it for about a month and a half, and against Kansas State, they felt like that the way K-State attacked field goals was perfect for it, and it goes for 11 yards, and it changed that game dramatically about midway through the third quarter.
Some reporter had written on the internet that during the preseason camp that the Cowboys had worked on a nifty fake one day.
I was going to let you work. I was going to let you bring that up. I wasn't going to bring that up.
That reporter got called in the head coach's office and asked why he was detailing fake field goals on the internet, and I'm like, nifty details how you did it? I mean, that's all I wrote, a nifty fake. Well, it is.
Oh, it is
quite nifty, but no. And this is the other thing. You know, Les Miles was very protective of this play, but I know for a fact he was not the curator of it. He was not the author of it.
Right.
This is a Joe DeForest special. It has been used many times since at LSU, where Les Miles is currently the head coach. So much so that most of the nation credits Les Miles with coming up with this fake. The Mad Hatter. That's part of his Mad Hatter reputation. Folks, this belongs solely as the author to Joe DeForest. It was his play. He deserves the credit. But to Joe's credit, he's never stood up and demanded, hey, give me credit for that. He's kind of let it go on with Les Miles. But you know what? When West Virginia comes calling this year, we need to make sure we practice this, defending this. I could see Joe DeForest pulling a page out of the Mike Gundy book, where he always comes in prepared with something creative. I could see Joe trying to bring up a reprise of this. Now, I don't know who the kicker and holder is for West Virginia. They'd have to be able to execute it, but I would be ready for it.
And Luke Phillips with great speed making the play, and this play completely changed the complexion of that Kansas State game. The Cowboys dominated from there, went on to a very important victory over a Kansas State team that eventually won the Big 12 football championship game against Oklahoma. Our choice, the great fake for play number 3.
Cowboys will go to the jumbo formation. Justin Waller at third tight end. Julius Crossland, the big tailback at 240 pounds, and fullback Sean Willis in. 4th and 1 from the 49. Pena fakes a handoff, drops back, throws it. It's caught by DeJuan Woods, wide open. Good night, Vienna. Pistols firing. Touchdown, DeJuan Woods.
What a call. Are you kidding me? He's 10 yards in the clear behind the secondary.
At number 2, we start to see a glimpse of the Woods brothers, but maybe in these last 2 plays, the 2 Woods brothers you might not expect, because at number 2 against Texas with Oklahoma State as a huge underdog in Mike Gundy's first season, you know, when it's 4th and 1 near midfield and you're a huge underdog to a team that's on its way to a national championship, it just doesn't matter. And in this case, oh, it mattered. It mattered to the Cowboys and sure mattered to Texas. They wish they wouldn't have had 11 guys up near the line of scrimmage when the ball was thrown. You know,
I'm going to have a different setup to this play. I'm going to go back earlier in the week on Thursday when the radio crew gets their opportunity to meet with the Oklahoma State coordinators.
It was on Friday that year.
Was it on Friday?
Yeah,
it was on Friday.
Yep, I think I know where we're going
because
with that.
Larry Fedora comes in to meet with us, and I don't really think he wanted to meet with us that day. I think he had something else he wanted to do. But we're in his office. And like you said, Texas was an overwhelming favorite. They were a favorite to win the national championship. And Oklahoma State, this was Mike Gundy's first year. Things weren't just going totally smooth. And I remember asking Larry Fedora, but aren't you having fun, Coach? Aren't you having any fun? And he looked at Dave Hunziker and I, and John Holcomb is on the phone via conference call. He said, I'm not having any fun at all. There's no fun in losing. I'm not having any fun. I said, yeah, but calling plays and trying to beat defenses, isn't that challenging? Don't you have fun doing that? And he again emphasized, I'm having no fun at all. After that meeting was over, you and I go out on the terrace, what I call the terrace, the patio there on the east end zone, and we looked at each other and said, this guy won't be back next year. He is not having any fun.
He's going to find another
He's
job
going to
or
go
do
find
something
another
else.
job, do something else. He may drive a truck for all we know. But you know what? He had some fun that Saturday.
Oh, and the thing about that game, as we think back about that play, that was not the only trick play or unusual play in that game. You had Al Pena running on a zone read, keeping it. He never kept it. I don't know if he ever kept it in practice. The whole Texas defense goes right. He goes left for about 20 yards and a touchdown. And then later in that first half, it's DeJuan Woods off a deflection, basically a reincarnation of the immaculate reception by Franco Harris scoring a touchdown. The Cowboys were up, what was it, 28-12 at half? Or 21-12 at half, if I remember right?
It was the major story of the day in college football. It was a night game.
6 o'clock night game,
6 o'clock night game, and the Cowboys are drilling Texas in the first half. And, it stopped the presses at that point. But unfortunately, we're going to do a little Paul Harvey here, and we'll wait until we get to play number 1 for the rest of the story.
Yes, and by the way, game did not turn out so well. Vince Young challenged by his head coach at halftime, the Texas quarterback, and we know what happened in the second half. But for a while, that night was a lot of fun. Number 2, a big part of that fun, 4th and 1 trickery by the Cowboys.
High formation, Woods, counter handoff to Shaw, hit in the backfield, and dropped for a 2-yard loss. No, he doesn't. Donovan Woods is carrying the football untouched into the end zone. Touchdown, Oklahoma State. Boy, he had me completely faked out, and Woods kept it and ran to his left, and all the defense reacted, and Woods just walked into the end zone. How about that?
What he did, he just put the ball back on his hip after the handoff and made it look like there was nothing happening. I just gave it to Seymour Shaw, and I mean that corner bit on it. He was in. He came around the right side of the formation. He had the man sacked, no question. He had Shaw down for a loss. Problem was, Shaw didn't have the football.
Our number 1 play may not be the trickiest play in terms of X's and O's or scheme, but in execution, it's hard to top. Donovan Woods against Baylor in 2004. I don't think I've seen live, maybe even on television, Robert, a play in which a quarterback executes a fake of this magnitude, and basically there's no one within 25 yards of him in any direction besides the players on the Baylor sideline who couldn't tackle him. It was an amazing fake that faked out everybody. We don't even have a good look at it because he faked out all the camera people and the guy that was calling the game.
Well, and both, radio, TV, nobody got it right. But here's your Paul Harvey, the rest of the story, because this was the 04 season. Last season, Les Miles was head coach. Mike Gundy called that play. He was the offensive coordinator. Mike had been an assistant at one point at Baylor. And because that staff got let go, he wasn't really a big fan of the Baylor Bears. So coming against Baylor, I'm sure Mike got an extra smile on his face for that call and that execution. But it was a year later. Donovan was no longer the quarterback executing there. He was on the defensive side. And we talked about that night DeJuan that had that big night. That night, Donovan got seen over and over again the rest of the football season jumping up, trying to deflect a pass that Vince Young never threw and instead tucked and ran 80 yards. So there's the rest of the story. But as far as that particular play, the execution on it was fantastic. And, like I said, I'm sure it brought a huge smile to the offensive coordinator's face. And that was really one of Donovan's really true gifts. He was a good runner, just an average passer, if that. But boy, he was a great ball handler. And I think some of that came from his experience. He was a tremendous basketball player at Millwood as well.
So Donovan Woods, fully clothed, but with one of the best naked bootlegs you'll ever see. About as close as you can come on a naked bootleg to not getting arrested and executing the naked bootleg. Number 1, and the Baylor players still looking for their pants.